Hey there, trainers. Welcome back to episode 2 of Future Sight, a soundproof project. We're back here with episode 2. I am, of course, Brendan Lewis, Mr. BDog46, on all the platforms that you care about, and I am, as always, joined by my good friend, Major Bowman, Jake Muller, as you may know him in the real world.
That's me.
Let's switch that up. And we've got a pretty exciting match here for week 2. We had a lot of fun doing the first one, so we figured we'd do it again. And like we kind of said last week, is we're going to go through and kind of pick out some important or exciting matches that sort of crop up from VGC history, and specifically the ones that are kind of in our wheelhouse a little bit. So I think we kind of talked about how from like 2013 on is some of the matches that we're going to be looking at, and we've got a pretty exciting one that's coming from 2016 this week, Jake.
It is from the last round of day 1 of the World Championships. So for context, 2016 was the first time they had the like day 1, day 2 structure. Or was that 15? I think it was 15. That was the first time.
I couldn't tell you.
It was 15. I played in it. It was 15.
There you go.
Anyway, so at 2016 Worlds, day 1, there were 8 rounds. And if you won 6 out of 8, you moved on to day 2. And so Jeudy and Shohei, who went by Zine, is a name that you might be familiar with, and that's probably how we'll refer to him. They were both 5-2 in round 8, so one of them was going to make it to day 2, one of them was not. And if you watched the stream of this World Championships, you'll recognize this match as the match with a million pop-offs.
Oh yeah.
It was so much fun. I did very bad at this World, so I was out after like round 3 or 4, and so I just spent the rest of the day watching the stream, and getting to see this live was so funny, because you're not going to see the player cams, but pretty much anytime something goes their way, they like fist pump, and it's also the match where Jeudy like jumps out of his chair at the very end.
Oh yeah,
spoiler.
It's just a constant back and forth where they're basically like baiting each other into bigger and bigger pop-offs, and it's just a lot of fun. There's kind of like a weird sort of like love it hate it relationship with player reactions in the community, but if you're a big fan of player reactions, then this is a match that you got to go back and watch.
I'm a little partial to them. I was a fist
I think
pumper.
It's exciting.
Yeah,
it's
just like exciting. You're happy. You did something good. You want to celebrate.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the context of the match here. So as Jake said, we're in kind of like the winner-in round here. We've got 2 very well-known players at this point in their careers. Of course, Jeudy is infamously the runner-up at the 2014 World Championships, where he was undone by none other than Pachirisu. So, I'm pretty sure anybody that's ever heard of VGC will know. Maybe not. If you don't know Jeudy himself, you know exactly the match that I'm talking about. And then, of course, Zine on the other side is one of the preeminent Japanese players at this point in his career. So it's a really exciting match, a lot of stakes on the line. And then I believe you can see already here the teams that are up on screen. And the teams here are kind of like they're pretty interesting, and for a couple of different reasons. And you'll see that it's a big mirror match. And on the left, you will see a team that came to be known as Big C. And it is an offshoot of the team on your right, which is Big 6, or the original Big 6 Pokemon. This was like a day 1 2016 format team.
Yeah, I think this is the December 15 into January 16 was when the Texas Marathon happened. We had like 6 Premier Challenges in 7 days, and it was really fun. Mm-hmm. And then like a weekend after that, there was also a Premier Challenge in like the first weekend of January. And I'm pretty sure I took the exact 6 that Jeudy is using to a January 6th Premier Challenge and won it or something. So it's a team that, if you know anything about VGC 2016, if you played it or watched it or just looked back on it at all, you'll recognize these compositions. But the cool thing is that across the year, like this team or a team that based on these teams was never bad. Like it was always something pretty consistent. You could take it to an event. If you play well, you'll probably go like X2 at worst. But the way that, like some of the sets, the way that Xerneas's or EV'd their natures, Groudon's movesets, physical, special, there's a lot of different variables in this team other than just the species of the Pokemon. I think Smeargle sets were the kind of the most interesting evolution across the course of the format. You'll see a couple different ones here. I actually don't remember if Jeudy brings Smeargle at all, but I know Zine does. And you'll see something I won't spoil it. If you know it, you know it, but it'll come into play.
Yeah, so this team was like hugely influential and was kind of like public enemy number one whenever you were team building, and we kind of know, looking in hindsight, that there were players that were pretty effectively able to kind of undo it with Pokemon choices. Of course, like we know that Wolf ended up winning Worlds with that Gengar Bronzong kind of stuff that handles this very well. But this team is also, I think you bring up the PC Marathon. Jake was also pretty famous, or infamously had 7 of 8 finishes at the Virginia Regional Championships that year. So that's a meme that circulates almost as much as thank you genies. So that's something that we're going to be looking quite a bit at as we go through this match here, is kind of the differences in the way that the Pokemon are trained or EV'd, or what their movesets are, because that's kind of the key to the matchup. So you see Smeargle running any number of 10 different moves, Kangaskhan, Adamant, Jolly, Talonflames were even trained to be bulky versus offensive. You know, Bold Xerneas caught on at some point, and then of course Groudon was going anywhere between mixed sets. There was a serious Groudon that placed at the World Championships this year. You would see Timid Groudon, you would see Brave Groudon, you would see level 49 Groudon. So all these things we're going to be keeping an eye on as we go through the set here. So let's get it going if you're ready, Jake. All right, so these players are going to come out here with 2 very different leads, where you'll see kind of like an offensive Groudon lead on Zene's side of the field, and then Kangaskhan Xerneas, probably second only to Smeargle Xerneas in the favored Xerneas leads. But we know immediately here that Jeudy is like not feeling really good about having Xerneas on the field, and really the only thing saving his position is fake out pressure. Yeah,
I mean, this is like the worst case scenario for Xerneas. The 2 Fairy resist immediately off the bat. Wait, Clefairy? Okay. So something on the list of teams from Worlds that I was looking at was incorrect. Oh gosh, I'll fix that.
Hold on, unprepared.
We'll see.
Okay, so we're gonna see immediate offense from Kangaskhan, which I think is a really good play there, because you want to start chipping away at these 2 Pokemon that are on the field, so that you're now looking at kind of like a late game Xerneas sweep, but you're also leaving Groudon wide open to wipe the field. So I think the critical hit probably did matter, because it would have been a spread move at that point, but that's a pretty like explosive turn 1 for both players there, and you can kind of imagine the pop-offs that are already happening on site.
Yeah, as soon as the Clefairy came in, Shohei immediately started popping up for good reason. Like, even if Eruption didn't take the knockout there, a Clefairy that's been taunted is a kind of useless Clefairy, because the main thing it does is follow me, maybe Helping Hand, Heal Pulse, but all of those are blocked by taunt. And if you're Zine, like especially now that the Xerneas is going to be locked in against Groudon no matter what, I think you're in a pretty okay spot here. Like 2 kills right off the bat in a format with restricteds like this is pretty massive.
Yeah, you feel great about this, and it's like just shy of the game being over already almost. With the way that momentum swings so quickly. But you can kind of see from this position here, a little bit of a predicament that players all over the format would find themselves in, which is your Groudon is staring down another Groudon. And there are like infinite number of ways that this matchup can go based on what the moveset is, what the defensive investment is, what the speed investment is. So if you're like a timid Earth Power Groudon, you know you're going to be able to get a move on there. And we're seeing actually a pretty uncommon use of Groudon, which is Thunder Wave.
I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Like I don't think I ever before or after. Yeah.
I mean, like at this point, I don't know if Jeudy even has a decent out, just because he would have to. I don't know. It's just really difficult from this spot. Especially, I mean, given this too, like the Groudon being faster than both of Jody's restricteds, there is like big info for Shohei. If it's Eruption, I think most of the Eruption Groudons were either like timid or a very like modest with very high speed or something like that. So not exactly surprising to see.
Right, yeah, but it is like somewhat surprising to see it outspeed Xerneas, just because there are certain points in the format where Xerneas was bulky when you were looking at more physical Groudons. There are certain points of the format where Xerneas was timid because you were like more concerned about dealing with opposing Xerneas or like non-Mega Rayquaza and things like that. So we kind of get a lot of information here right off the bat that we see what's almost definitely a timid Eruption from Zene's side of the field, and what's almost definitely like a slower, bulkier Xerneas, like probably modest on Jeudy's team.
Yep. And I guess we saw the Precipice Blades from Jody's Groudon, but that's about it. So it's hard to tell what.
Yeah, you can't really deal it's hard to infer off of that because even the timid Groudons were running Precipice Blades at points in the format.
With Cresselia though, I think Cresselia lends you to think that it's more of a physical, probably slower, bulky one. So right. That's the one that has the best synergy with Cresselia. You have like Trick Room, Skill Swap kind of stuff.
Gravity.
Yeah. So we know that Jeudy has 5. Okay, Jeudy doesn't have Smeargle. It's Clefairy over Smeargle on the screen. So pretend that the Smeargle on Jody's side is a Clefairy, because I know he brings Talonflame in Game 3 at least. I'll probably try to fix that. If it's fixed already when you're watching this, great. There was no problem. I did nothing wrong. If it's not fixed, Smeargle? I couldn't figure out it in the video.
Jeudy never had a Smeargle.
I think what happened is I was looking at a day 2 team list, and he probably switched.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was one of the big things. Yep.
Oh well,
right.
Game 2.
So now we know. So we're gonna hop into Game 2 here, and this is kind of Jeudy having gotten a whole bunch of information, knowing that a lot of things are faster than his Pokemon, and saying like, that is fine by me. I'm gonna go ahead and lead my Cresselia and try and just kind of bring everything around and slow it down instead.
Yeah, I like that adjustment a lot, given that you know that the Groudon's probably fast. Trick Room gives you a pretty big advantage because the slowest thing on Shohei's team is probably the Groudon, other than Smeargle, but like a Smeargle mirror isn't going to be, I think, on their minds right now.
Right.
And this is the reason I hate going for fake out mirrors on Kangaskhan. I was such a preacher of that being such a bad play over the course of the entirety of like 2014 to 16. I hated it so much, and that's why.
The way that both players kind of play this turn makes you think that at least one of them knows that it's a speed tie. Is kind of the way that I kind of
a speed tie at worst.
Interpret that turn. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, looking at Jody's Kangaskhan, I remember the 181 HP is 4 HP, so it's most likely just max attack and speed. So it's probably just like Jolly max.
Right, and then with the speed drop there, Jeudy, knowing his calculations probably pretty well, is going and knowing that it's a timid Groudon, right, is going straight for the knockout there. And Zine is fully content to trade Smeargle here. And if you have played this format, it probably brings a little like joy to your heart to see Smeargle go down. A little bit of
catharsis for you.
Definitely. But interesting thing about Smeargle going down there is we don't see a Focus Sash activate, which means it is Choice Scarf, which of all the evil Smeargle sets to run, that is the most evil.
Are you sure? Are you sure it's Choice Scarf, Brendan?
Wait, what else would it be?
You'll see.
What?
there was another set that popped up that you're probably just forgetting, yeah.
What?
But at this point, like, I think...
What else did it run except for those, like...
We'll get there.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this is kind of the mode that makes you really favor Cresselia, right? Is when you have it with Groudon on the field, and that's kind of what makes these like Cresselia and even the Bronzong variants of it so scary. Is that when everything else is going really quickly, you have the opportunity to just kind of like go in the other direction and drop things down. Sometimes they ran Thunder Wave. This one has Icy Wind and probably also has Trick Room. So you just have kind of like infinite ways to control the field with Cresselia.
Yeah, and especially there, I think Jeudy knows that it's probably a bulkier Talonflame. Most of them in this format were. And so with Kang being at -1 speed, it's going to be outsped by the Groudon. It's going to be outsped by the Groudon. Even if Talonflame goes for like Brave Bird there instead of Tailwind, Eruption's probably still going to KO with Helping Hand. I didn't expect Talonflame to take that much from that Eruption.
Right.
Jeudy does show off there that he is a mixed Groudon. Which is not super surprising given the team comp. Like we keep coming back to like Brave or like Quiet Groudons. Probably Brave at this point because I think with Cresselia you're going to be wanting to use Precipice Blades a lot.
Yeah, you think it's Brave,
yeah. But I mean, Eruption was just a really good move. Like,
yeah, definitely. He kind of took advantage of knowing that he kind of had the upper hand and using what he had gained as far as speed control with that one icy wind to kind of like capitalize on his offensive position and just kind of like not really wipe the field, but get a huge amount of damage down with Eruption, which is kind of one of the most interesting things to me about restricted formats, is that even like resisted damage is going to do a huge amount of damage because of the sheer amount of stats that are on the field. So that's like a pretty interesting game too. We saw Jeudy take it like pretty convincingly. You can kind of see that this is a very momentum based format, especially in the mirror. And you've kind of seen now the way that both players are trying to play the game, and it's a very like Groudon centric game plan.
Yeah, and especially I think one thing to point out is that the game was pretty much over by turn 2 both times.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's a lot of times in these mirrors that it's kind of how it went. Yeah, whoever gets their Xerneas set up in a good position first probably wins. Whoever gets their Groudon in a good position to do a bunch of damage first probably wins. And that's just kind of lends it points out the volatility of this format a little bit, which I think is part of why people didn't like it very much. Like Smeargle certainly contributed, but in these first 2 games we've seen that Smeargle did absolutely nothing other than sacrifice itself.
Right. We love to see it.
And even then, it was a pretty like one-sided game both times. And it's really it's important to remember that like team preview is probably the most important part of these games in this format.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And specifically like leading with options in the back to cover what you might see. And so that's just a lot of what 2016 boiled down to, in my opinion, at least. A lot of people kind of reduce it to like, oh, Smeargle's Xerneas format. And like those were obviously very influential, but I think discounting the rest of the format isn't fair, and that's probably something I did when it was around. But it was way more interactive than just that. That's
I think definitely at this point in the format, you're totally right. Mm-hmm. In that we ended up having what was a pretty diverse top cut, if memory serves. So I think you're totally right. It's important to remember those sorts of things. And at this point, this Smeargle Xerneas lead has like kind of been solved. So when you're playing against it, you almost always have an option available. So it's really going down to like the different options of your team. And like Jake said, like what can you do on turn 2 with a switch to get yourself out of an unfavorable turn 1? All right, let's watch game 3. So both players are 1-1. This is where the pop-offs really escalate. You can kind of see both of these players are like super tense. They're like shaking in their chairs and everything like that. They want the pop-off.
They're preparing for the pop-off.
They are preparing for the pop-off. So we're going to see Con Artist on the right, an old favorite there, where the Smeargle Kangaskhan lead, which you saw a lot, especially with Power Punch Kangaskhan, so that it could kind of get things going.
Yeah.
And then the Kangaskhan Talonflame lead is very much a kind of like, okay, I want to get Tailwind up and then bring either Xerneas or Groudon in from the back.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Talonflame a lot of time is just a setup Pokemon for the rest of your team. You might recognize Talonflame as like a big damage dealer in like 2014, but really it was more of a supportive Pokemon, as evidenced by this taunt here. But now, Brendan, you'll see that Mental Herb was the big set around its time.
Whoa! Yeah. And there's Smeargle doing what it does best. And also of note from that first turn is we are confirming that it is actually a Kangaskhan speed tie, and Jeudy lost it this time. But this is kind of the point in the format where, like I said, everything's kind of been solved. So Chestoberry Talonflame is literally there exclusively to deal with Dark Void Smeargle. And it's doing what it does best, and now it's going to get the opportunity to taunt again. Or in this case, Will-O-Wisp.
I like that Will-O-Wisp a lot too. Because again, it kind of sets up whatever is left in the back. Like you're probably not going to be keeping this Talonflame around much longer. If the Smeargle Dark Voids again, like nothing's happening to your own Kangaskhan. But I really like that Will-O-Wisp because it sets up the rest of the game. And now, since the Smeargle Tailwinded, you can probably Tailwind this turn with Talonflame, and you'll have Tailwind for one turn longer, which again is a pretty big setup. It's these like planning ahead kinds of things that like really define games in this format.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note that Gale Wings hasn't been changed yet at this point, I believe. So you can still have the priority flying type moves at any point in the game, as opposed to just being like before you take damage anyway. And it's kind of an interesting position because even though Jody's Kangaskhan is asleep, it is definitely the scarier Kangaskhan right now because it's burned 2 turns of sleep, and it's threatening to knock out Smeargle, and I don't think we've seen its fighting type move yet, but potentially threatening to also knock out the Kangaskhan.
Yeah, a lot of them are running low kick, mostly for that Kangaskhan mirror.
Right.
Because again, like Power Up Punch is great, but in a format like this where a lot of your Pokemon are going to be taking a bunch of damage from a restricted, it's not as useful, or it's not as you're not as likely to get as much use out of it. So Low Kick is nice for big damage. I'm pretty sure Low Kick, I think Adamant Low Kick straight up one shots other Kangaskhan. This is something we talked about last time.
I think
we weren't sure, and then I looked it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can we just pause for just a second?
Yes,
I was trying to. Okay, so I thought that was a pretty interesting position there, because like we were saying, like when Kangaskhan wakes up, it's going to be hugely influential, and it does, and it hits the Groudon switch in, and Eruption is now immediately off the table, which we saw Zine like really do a huge number. Once he was able to get momentum with his Groudon, so now he's relying on either single target moves or like dealing with. He is, because the other one is Thunder Wave, right? So you basically like eliminated a huge offensive threat from Groudon, and now Xerneas, for the first time all set, actually is in like a phenomenal position where the only thing it's dealing with is potentially an Earth Power or a burned Frustration. So that was kind of a huge turn, and the choice to sort of like preserve Smeargle is probably one that you kind of have to scratch your head and think about, knowing that Groudon coming in that slot, it's going to take a huge double edge. But I also think at the same time it's reasonable to expect that that's not going to be like a double edge targeting Smeargle. Yeah,
I don't think that's particularly a bad play from Shohei. I think getting Groudon in to take advantage of things being asleep is fine. Especially if you knock out the Talonflame that turn, either Groudon or Xerneas is going to come in, and if you're Eruption, Thunder Wave, it's pretty likely that you're going to be faster than the other Groudon. So getting Groudon in is fine. It just happened to be I think it was a second turn wake from the Kangaskhan and a double edge into that slot. And Eruption is both off the table, like you mentioned, and also it just gets knocked out by a second double edge here. So I don't think a Frustration would knock out Jeudy's Kangaskhan from here. So assuming he either wins the speed tie or doesn't get knocked out, this Xerneas has a pretty free Geomancy right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the scariest thing you can see in this format.
Yeah. But I mean, again, it comes back to like making plays to set up one turn that'll win you the game. And that's essentially what just happened here. Jeudy, I would say, won the game on this turn. This turn that just happened.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right, let's send it. So at this point, you feel like Jeudy has a pretty free play, right? Which is like double edge into Kangaskhan and Geomancy. And there's not really like a great way to punish that. So I think if you're Shohei there, what you're playing for is win the speed tie and crit.
Yeah, I think that's kind of your only option. Although if it's Low Kick, I don't know, we didn't see. Yeah, it's Frustration.
Yeah,
so.
I don't think we've seen either of them do it. But at this point, you are like pretty happy to trade your Kangaskhan at this point for whatever's in the back, plus the Geomancy. And with Groudon already down, like the game's over.
Yeah, I mean, okay, even let's think about like worst case there. Worst case, you lose the speed tie and get crit, so your Kangaskhan doesn't double edge, and your Xerneas probably gets Thunder Waved. And what? Like, as long as you're not getting fully paralyzed, it's still in a really strong spot, especially because Tailwind with your Talonflame in the back should be able to match I'm missing a word here. Counteract the speed drop from Thunder Wave. And you have your boosted Xerneas, and nothing's really going to be taking damage from that. And you're still facing down a burned Kangaskhan. Like, there's not a whole lot that can go wrong other than getting fully paralyzed a bunch. So even then, I think that's still a pretty low risk turn for Jeudy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've kind of been talking about like setting up plays for X time. Like when you're setting up your end game, you're like making a play 3 or 4 turns in advance, and that's kind of where you're taking your advantage from. And you could argue that like the game even pivoted around that Will-O-Wisp, which was what, turn 2.
Yeah.
And knowing this is a fully special Groudon, you take away any offensive pressure that your team may have against a boosted Xerneas by burning Kangaskhan.
Yeah, by burning Kangaskhan and double edging the Groudon once. Like, that was pretty much it.
Right. Yeah. So here, Smeargle's going to go and basically sack itself off again. But Shohei has no way to get a like free Geomancy at any point. So he's kind of like hoping for that evasion boost to go through. I hadn't actually seen that. And I actually didn't see it happen because we were talking. But that's like a pretty key. Let's pause it.
Oh no. Okay.
So that was like kind of one of the things that Smeargle could do, which is why it was so infuriating, right? Is it could pull evasion boost or speed boost and all of a sudden be hugely influential. But you'll see that the out that Zine was playing to there is, and we didn't even notice it, but he had gotten an evasion boost, and that was pretty much his only out when Smeargle came onto the field, was to get an evasion boost, dodge 2 attacks, put both things to sleep, and then Geomancy with his own
he almost
Xerneas.
got there.
and that was still even like kind of a fringe out too, because you're gonna need to get sleep turns, assuming that this is a bulkier Groudon. You're probably gonna need to get special attack drops, maybe even a crit there. But he was playing to the out that was there, and it's probably I don't want to say it's not greedy, right? Because it's the out, but it feels bad. Because you've seen things like that happen more often in this format than in a lot of other situations.
Yeah, I think that was one of the bigger things that people were upset about this format with too, was Moody being so influential. And I would wager that VGC 2016 is why Moody can no longer raise evasion. In Gen 7, they removed that as a possibility from Moody. So.
Well, I think there was even a point in the was it 2015? No, I think it was 2016, where there was enough pressure from the community that there was actually an official statement from Chris Brown that they were like looking at Smeargle and deciding whether or not they were going to ban it like mid-format.
It was it was like January, February, I think.
Yeah, which is
or maybe it might have been around when Virginia happened after that.
I think it was like in the middle of the year.
Okay.
Because I don't think it was an immediate reaction to Virginia, but it was sometime in like March, April, or something like that he gave some sort of statement. And in hindsight, that doesn't seem that weird because we have kind of this like rotating format kind of nonsense going on that wouldn't have been the weirdest thing for them to be like, okay, here's your Xerneas series. Groudon series was fun. Here's Xerneas series, which is the same as Groudon series, but you can't use Smeargle.
Yeah.
But back in the day, it would have been like a huge deal for them to axe this one Pokemon and basically say that it is like too much of an issue for this like competitive format that honestly doesn't get a ton of love some of the time to continue functioning.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal whenever Chris, I think he either tweeted it or tweeted a link to like an announcement or something, but
right.
Yeah, you're right. They said something like, we'll be keeping an eye on Smeargle or Dark Void. I don't remember what the specific thing was.
Yeah, so it ended up being nothing happening to it at that moment, but it seems likely that was part of the reason that Moody ended up getting changed.
That, and I forgot at the time, or a couple minutes ago, but they changed Dark Void too.
They did,
after this format, after this game in Sun and Moon. They like lowered the accuracy and made it so only Darkrai could use it. So
yeah, it's
they said we will no longer see this in competitive play.
Smeargle is done.
Smeargle ruined Dark Void and Moody
for itself.
Right.
But it is kind of interesting to look at in hindsight, though, because people found ways to play around it. It was hugely centralizing, but we saw like a lot of different things start to crop up where, we saw this Chesto Talonflame where it's basically designed to deal with Scarf Smeargle. We saw things like, like Taunt Gengar, Lumberry on Cresselia or Bronzong, and all these like different things to deal with it because of how influential it was. And there's the pop-off. You don't quite get to see it, but you can see that Jeudy is standing. But yeah, so that's a pretty exciting match. It is kind of an important little representation of what was going on in 2016 at certain points in the format. Even though it was not like the most common thing to see Amir at this point in the format, it's definitely not like you were shocked to see a Groudon Xerneas matchup by any point. But you get a chance to kind of see how momentum based the format is, and then what sort of things had evolved by this point in the format to respond to earlier points in the format.
And I think one thing that we didn't really touch on is how this one team can have so many different game plans too. I don't think either player like repeated a lead throughout that set.
No, I don't think so either.
Even though the teams are similar, they had 4 of the 6 same Pokemon. Even in a full 6-mon mirror with this team, you're going to see a lot of different options as far as leads go, or as far as ultimate game plans go. Just because the way that you set up your team can be so much different based on your Groudon set, your Kangaskhan set, your Smeargle set. Like there's so many different variables there.
Yeah, what the sixth Pokemon is. Yeah, all those different things. So pretty interesting. And then we know that, for all the infamy of this team, that it didn't end up really placing all that well. I think there was like 1 or 2 in top 8 or something like that. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think it ended up like even placing super well.
Edu had Groudon Xerneas with like Kangaskhan, Hitmontop, Bronzong.
Oh, that's right, Bronzong, right?
Yeah,
so that was the one.
I know that there was
so that was in top 4. That was top 4.
Right. I know that Barry Anderson had X-Ray, which isn't this team, but it's another Xerneas type team.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, even if Barry Anderson did have Groudon Xerneas, it's not the same team.
No, I'm just thinking of Xerneas that made it to top 8.
Right. Okay.
Especially because that Wolf team that you mentioned was in top 8 3 times, and that team is like very specifically made to stomp out this Big 6 kind of team, which it did.
Right, and then also important to note is that it was not until the aftermath of Worlds that Xerneas Kyogre became a real... because Justin Karras made that run with it, and then after that it was like flavor of the month for the rest of the format, but that wasn't until kind of like after the fact. So yeah, cool set. Thanks for coming along for our second episode here, and we'll be back in just a couple weeks with our next one as we continue to take a tour of some old fun matches. We've got a huge list, so as always, if there's something you want to see us talk about, you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to tell us how good we look, anything like that, we're happy to take any feedback on any of the media that we're available on. So yeah, it's been fun. Yeah,
they get to see us now. They get to see how good we look.
Yeah,
this is new. You're all welcome.
You used to just always hear our voices, but now you can you can see us. Yeah, so that's gonna do it for us. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and we hope to see you then.